Hanoka, an antisocial ugly loser, lives his everyday life, getting bullied by his classmates for sitting next to the school baddie, Ayaka. His life takes a dramatic turn when Ayaka rescues him and reveals her true nature as a powerful witch. From that day onward, Ayaka protects him from evil witches while he gets to clap her anytime he wants. However, before any of this, Hanoka is on his way to school and notices everyone swarming around a girl named Ayaka as soon as she gets on the bus. She walks through them majestically while Hanoka is pushed aside like the side character he is. Hanoka recalls that she is actually the daughter of the chairwoman. He figures that he could just come to school in her car and doesn't understand why she takes the bus. Hanoka never thought he would have anything to do with her, but Ayaka ended up sitting next to him. Even when she sits next to him, the two of them have never spoken to each other. He accidentally drops his eraser and Ayaka picks it up for him. Later that day, Hanoka gets bullied by girls in his class because of what Ayaka did and beaten by the boys as well. Following that, Hanoka is handling his teacher's work when a girl sneaks up on him, and after stealing the papers, she returns back to Ayaka. As usual, girls surround Ayaka and tell her about what they ate for breakfast while she ignores them, and Hanoka gets pushed away as usual. After school, the boys of his class invite Hanoka to karaoke, but he refuses due to his class duties. Afterward, he goes out of class to throw away the trash and notices a stuffed toy inside. He picks it up and notices that day's weather written on it. Just then, Hanoka notices the whole school building falling on top of him and freaks out, thinking he'll lose his life without getting any action. It eventually falls on top of him, but luckily, Ayaka manages to save him and Hanoka notices that they are flying in the air. Suddenly, some robot bunnies start attacking them. Ayaka tosses him up and starts fighting the robots, managing to catch him after defeating them. Nonetheless, the bunnies get back up and Ayaka advises Hanoka to stay close. She begins fighting them with her broomstick and eventually attacks them with fire. However, fire doesn't affect them much and Hanoka notices a girl calling him towards her. He goes in that direction while Ayaka manages to defeat the bunny robots. Sadly, Hanoka gets confronted by a lot more of those robots and they make him kneel. One of the robots steps forward with an axe, ready to decapitate him. Hanoka tries to calm himself down by thinking that all these events must be a dream. Suddenly, the bunny gets attacked and Ayaka scolds him for not staying close to her. She informs him that saving people is her mission, telling him not to worry even if he's confused. Ayaka then calls Hanoka her princess, which Hanoka doesn't really understand. He then notices Ayaka's hair burning and asks why she covered for him. Ayaka replies that it's because he is her princess. Surprisingly, Hanoka gets mad and tells Ayaka that she should have left him alone, further saying that she shouldn't ruin that God's gifted hair for an NPC like him. He then gets embarrassed for what he said and protects Ayaka from a rabbit, making him fall onto the ground. Hanoka picks him up and buries him in her milkers as a reward. The bunnies start to get back up and use one of her extreme abilities to defeat them. Later, Hanoka finds himself inside Ayaka's private room in school. He remembers her dressed up as a witch and wonders if it all was a dream. She promises to explain everything one day and suggests going home together as there is no need to protect him in secrecy. Hanoka realizes that the two of them have always been doing stuff together and wonders what it means. On their way back, Ayaka tells Hanoka that he is her master and invites him to walk next to her. The next morning, Hanoka gets on the bus and Ayaka ends up sitting next to him. Everyone gets jealous as Ayaka walks next to Hanoka on their way to class. Hanoka then goes to the restroom and gets beaten once again on his way back. But before they can do anything worse, Ayaka arrives, making them let Hanoka go. She then tells Hanoka that if anyone were to mess with him, she'd make sure to burn them away. During lunch, he is forced to sit next to Ayaka and the other girls start complaining about her hanging with a low-life loser. However, she ignores all of them. Hanoka asks her to give some time to her fans as well, but Ayaka replies that whom she eats with is her choice. He replies that it's also his choice to go back and leave. On his way back, Hanoka regrets behaving rudely with Ayaka and notices that the school building has gone back to normal. Just then, a girl informs Hanoka that it was illusion magic and she wanted to find out if he was harmless or not, which is why she did what she did. She then walks towards Hanoka, saying that she has come for him. The girl introduces herself as Tanpopo and restricts Hanoka's movements, but Ayaka manages to save him. Tanpopo says that Hanoka belongs to the tower and she will be taking him there. The bunny robots started appearing again, and this time, Tanpopo brought a ton of them. They all start swarming the two of them and the clash results in an explosion. Hanoka wakes up and realizes that Ayaka shielded him from their attack and got injured instead. He realizes that his not listening to Ayaka got her injured and he makes up his mind to believe in Ayaka no matter what. She makes him promise that Hanoka won't run away during lunchtime and mentions that she's alright, considering how her body is made out of fire. Suddenly, all the bunnies start burning and Ayaka emerges from the fire. She starts burning them and Tanpopo manages to escape in the nick of time. Following that, Hanoka gets changed again and the two of them walk back home. Hanoka thanks Ayaka for giving him her sausage during lunch. The next day, their teacher introduces Tanpopo as the new transfer student along with Rin, Kotsu, Mei, and Kana. Hanoka realizes that there are more of them and Ayaka replies that they are all witches. While traveling on the bus, Hanoka remembers all the events that have taken place the past few days, and it bothers him that he is the only one caught up in this mess. He had made up his mind to get some answers from Ayaka today and realized that she was not on the bus. Hanoka wonders if she was attacked by the witches and walks into class, seeing Ayaka threatening all the witches with her fire. Hanoka realizes that it's not their classroom and Ayaka replies that she cast a spell to make sure Hanoka would come to this room. She calls it a witch hunt and reminds Hanoka that she is doing all of this because he seems to be troubled by the new witch's arrival. Apparently, one of the witches got away from Ayaka and she decided to torture the others, hoping the last one would return. He then asks Ayaka to stop and Tanpopo starts yelling at Ayaka for attacking them out of nowhere. Tanpopo then blames Hanoka for not disciplining Ayaka correctly and he argues that the two of them are just classmates and don't have that sort of relationship. Ayaka suggests burning Tanpopo but Hanoka refuses and asks Tanpopo the reason she is after him. Tanpopo figures that Ayaka hasn't told him and lets Hanoka know that Ayaka is on the side that has been hiding Hanoka all this time. Apparently, Tanpopo doesn't bear any grudge and just wants his body, specifically the white thing inside it.
Damn!
Kana says that Hanoka might misunderstand it but Tanpopo doesn't understand what she is talking about. Meanwhile, Hanoka starts freaking out after thinking about the white thing. Tanpopo then advises them not to be so easygoing as one of them is still on the run. Suddenly, block liquid starts falling off the ceiling and Mei emerges, falling on top of Hanoka. She blocks Ayaka's attacks and frees the other four witches. Mei then grabs Hanoka and scolds the other four for getting captured so easily. Just then, an explosion occurs and Ayaka walks towards Mei. She warns Ayaka not to step forward or her pet tiger will rip Hanoka's head off. Ayaka reassures Hanoka that she will save him and wonders how she should cook the eye patch girl. Mei thought that Ayaka was protecting Hanoka's white stuff but turns out the boy himself is valuable to her. She then reminds Ayaka that Hanoka is currently in her hands and just when the tiger bites, Ayaka burns its face and Mei notices that Ayaka has the same injury as Hanoka. Before she can cook her alive, Mei decides to take her leave and the bunnies take the other girls to safety. Soon after, Hanoka wakes up in Ayaka's room and questions why she is wearing a scarf. She makes an excuse and mentions that she wanted him to live a normal life but if things stay the same, he will keep on getting attacked by other witches. In order to restore peace, Ayaka needs to make a move and defeat the mastermind behind all of this. However, Ayaka doesn't know who the mastermind might be and Hanoka thinks about how she never tells him anything for his own sake. He also realizes that she is most likely hiding her injuries behind that scarf. Eventually, he asks Ayaka to tell him everything about witches and requests to make him her apprentice. Elsewhere, some freaky-looking creatures are having a meeting. Kazane asks Kronwar the reason a villain like her wants to meet her. Kronwar reminds Kazane that they are meeting after 140 years and how it is customary to greet the witch who rules an area. Kazane reminds Kronwar that she is a witch of the tower and while Kronwar agrees, she also tells Kazane that they are comrades who survived together. She had heard that Medusa's underlings picked a fight with Kazane's people and said that war might break out sooner or later. The next day, Hanoka receives a call from Ayaka and goes out as she suggests a meetup. Hanoka is nervous as he is meeting the prettiest girl in the school and soon after, she arrives. The two of them walk around the town and Ayaka refuses to tell him where they are headed to. Following that, she informs Hanoka that she is a witch employed by the workshop. The witches in the world are divided into two types and the ones who protect the world are known as workshop witches. Their job is to monitor cities and make sure magic isn't used for evil deeds. They set up a workshop in each designated sector and take up residence in that sector to protect it. Meanwhile, the other type of witch uses magic for selfish reasons and is always scheming to bring chaos to the world. If Hanoka were to fall into the hands of tower witches, disaster would fall on this world. Eventually, the two of them end up in a cafe and Hanoka orders some ice cream. Suddenly, a girl with big plot comes running and greets Ayaka by falling on the table. Hio's magic freezes Hanoka's ice cream and she informs Ayaka that Kronwar is currently present in town along with the Star Team and Cherry Blossom Team. However, seeing that Ayaka looks annoyed by Hio's continuous blabbering, he decides to take her leave. She then takes him shopping where he notices a girl helping a lost child. Thinking that it would be a disaster if Ayaka were to help the kid, that girl then realizes that Hanoka is the target she was searching for and shoves the kid aside. Instantly, she pins Hanoka onto the ground and her friends get prepared to fight Ayaka. But her fire magic throws them away and Hanoka manages to get away as well. The other witch named Ai starts raining down bullets on Ayaka and then goes for her sword which Ayaka ends up burning. Eventually, she explodes the 3 witches and the 3 witches decide to leave, saying that Ayaka got lucky. On their way back, Hanoka apologizes for being as weak as a twig and Ayaka agrees. She then mentions it would be better for him to learn a bit about magic and hopes they find the mastermind soon. Hanoka then asks Ayaka the reason she isn't hiding him if the tower witches want him that badly, but she asks him to not worry about that stuff. Ayaka advises him to worry more about his women-repelling face than other things. The two of them then arrive at the workshop where Kazane scolds Ayaka for creating a mess at the shopping mall. Hanoka tries taking the blame and Kazane mentions that Ayaka is her daughter and tells Hanoka that it's a custom for the person to be brought to the witch's superior who is taking an apprentice. The 5 witches appear in front of them once again and Ayaka advises Hanoka to watch his teacher and learn. All 5 of them get into formation, but all it takes is one explosion to blast them away. After arriving at school, Hanoka opens his locker and finds a ton of letters full of threats. Afterward, they are on their way to class and Ayaka says that even if the battle ends quickly, there is still much Hanoka can learn from it. After entering the class, Ayaka puts a bunch of books in front of Hanoka and begins teaching him. During gym class, the teacher suggests playing tennis and Ayaka asks Hanoka to team up. The teacher also tells Hanoka to team up with Ayaka as the girls can't handle her alone. She also calls it a part of his training. While Ayaka is playing well, Hanoka begins costing them the game. Nonetheless, she helps him get back up and shows him the correct way to hold the racket. Finally, it is time to go home and Hanoka wonders why he is such a loser. Ayaka suggests going home as Hanoka seems too exhausted to continue the training. After getting on the bus, Hanoka mentions how he never thought that their school would be a workshop. Just then, Ayaka notices Kronwar sitting in the backseat and she tells him to stay put. Kronwar then gets up and starts walking towards them, telling Ayaka to appreciate her resplendent entrance. Ayaka tries attacking, but Kronwar uses her magic to freeze her in place. Hanoka then gets in front of Ayaka and tells Kronwar to stop, but she tells Hanoka that even if she gouges out her heart, Ayaka will not lose her life. Following that, Kronwar stabs Hanoka in the stomach, but he notices that there isn't a wound. Suddenly, Ayaka falls onto the ground and Hanoka realizes that she's bleeding. Kronwar tells Hanoka that she is wounded in the place he was stabbed, which means any injury he suffers is inflicted upon Ayaka's body instead. It only works when they are close to each other, and there are also times when it doesn't. Hanoka tries to argue and Kronwar tells him to shut up. She then mentions that it is the rule for one who signs a contract with Hanoka. Apparently, Ayaka borrowed his powers to become an invincible witch, promising to serve and sacrifice herself for him. Kronwar further says that he needs to unleash more of his powers in order to save Ayaka and shows him a pill that might help. Hanoka seems hesitant as he remembers that tower witches want destruction of the world, but Kronwar says that she doesn't care about the world and reminds Hanoka that the pill is the only way to save Ayaka. She then puts the pill in her mouth and brings it close to Hanoka, but Ayaka makes it explode. She reassures Hanoka that a wound like that isn't that big of a deal and asks him to close his eyes as she's going to become something else. Suddenly, Ayaka grabs Kronwar by her throat and pins her down to the ground. Kronwar finds Ayaka's powers to be quite beautiful but decides to take her leave as her barrier starts weakening. Afterward, Hanoka finds himself at the bus stop with Ayaka lying next to him. He takes her to the infirmary without doing anything creepy to her. After reaching home, he puts the pill that Kronwar gave him in the drawer. The next day, it is finally time for training and Ayaka starts taking pictures of Hanoka, who's wearing a witch costume. With that being said, the first lesson is about the robes they are wearing. She asks him to jump and the robe takes him to a surprising height, where the birds start attacking him. Luckily, Ayaka manages to catch him and advises him to hold her if he wants a better explanation. Hanoka doesn't miss this once-in-a-lifetime experience and intentionally touches the areas where the sun doesn't shine, making it look like a mistake. After holding her, Hanoka notices that she is really light, making him worried about her diet. Elsewhere, Tanpopo gets in a fight with AI, who doesn't want them to bring the Loot Llama into school. Hanoka finally understands that the robe makes the body lighter and Ayaka then takes out her broom, informing him that it is stored inside the robe. He then tries taking out his own but fails to do so. Just then, the other students start arriving in the gym and Hanoka starts to panic, but Ayaka mentions that they can't see them due to the robes. She then asks Hanoka if high places bother him and starts flying on her broom while carrying Hanoka, without waiting for his reply. She tells Hanoka that this is his flying practice until he takes out his own broom and informs him that workshop witches patrol the town like this every day. The two of them fly around the town and later sit together to watch the sunset, where Hanoka gets tired and rests on her shoulder. Following that, Ayaka and Hanoka are on their way back to school and he tells Ayaka about the kid getting bullied. She replies that their only job is to stop the bad witches and that's a job for the police. Hanoka argues that the student is of their school and promises to not use magic, but she still refuses. Having no other choice, Hanoka shockingly takes out his own broom and jumps off Ayaka's broom. just before kissing the ground. He gains control and crashes into the bullies, saving the girl. The bullies then start cornering Hinoka when suddenly, Ayaka appears and burns them to a crisp. Turns out those witches were from the tower and set up a trap as they knew Hinoka's personality. Two guards are talking about Medusa and wonder why she has to be locked up with such high security. He doesn't get why sealing her underground, keeping her tightly restrained and posting guards to keep watch is necessary. The other guard mentions that if she gets out, the world is done for. At least that is what the head warden told him, but he doesn't believe it. Nonetheless, the fact that she is kept in such a condition makes it clear what kind of creature she is. Suddenly, Medusa smiles, making the guard freak out and the crystal around her starts to break. Elsewhere, the 5 tower witches are making a plan to deal with Ayaka and Rin tells them not to fight the fire witch anymore. Tanpopo starts to argue, but Rin explains that they should wait for Hinoka to be alone and attack him instead. The witches decide to go with this plan, but Tanpopo disrupts, saying that those two are always together. Kronwar ends up hearing their conversation and asks to join in as well. On the other hand, Hinoka wakes up and goes to the bathroom where his sister, Kasumi, greets him. While he brushes his teeth, Kasumi tries fixing his hair. She then asks Hinoka about the girl who called last weekend. Hinoka ends up making an excuse and Kasumi asks the reason she called. Hinoka replies that she informed him about the fun day they were having on Monday where the class will be having a speed penguin carving exhibition. Kasumi then questions the reason he left the house in such a hurry afterward, and Hinoka says that he left to buy the right chisel as he wanted the 120-degree one. Kasumi ends up buying what he just told, only to later put the comb on Hinoka's throat, asking if that was a call from Ayaka. Hinoka tries to lie once again, but Kasumi mentions that she has heard the rumors and people are starting to bully her just because she is his sister. Hinoka replies that it is just a coincidence as the two of them go on the same bus and sit next to each other, making Kasumi threaten him with the hairdryer. She then reminds Hinoka how he went to the meetup spot an hour ago and told Ayaka that he just got there, making Hinoka realize that Kasumi followed him. Furthermore, she saw everything they did and decided to visit his room late to ask more questions. On their way to school, Hinoka wonders whether he should keep this a secret from his sister and thinks about how Kasumi has been getting bullied because of him. Hinoka then realizes that the bus is about to leave and runs towards it but trips and falls in front of Tanpopo. Elsewhere, the other 3 witches have cornered Ayaka and Mei tries touching her but gets denied. This results in the 3 of them attacking her at once. Meanwhile, Tanpopo tells Hinoka that the fire witch most likely is getting dominated as their plan was to split and conquer them both. This reminds her of when Kronwar told them that the best way to attack is by splitting them up as Ayaka absorbs powers from Hinoka which makes her invincible. She further mentioned that if their teacher, Medusa, found out that they consorted with Kronwar, they might be in trouble. But Kronwar didn't receive the reaction she expected, making her realize that Medusa was too soft on them. Back in the present, Tanpopo orders her bunnies to take Hinoka away while he thinks of a way to get to Ayaka. Suddenly, a giant garage sale-looking teddy bear appears and grabs the bunnies. Hinoka notices Kasumi standing on top of it and he destroys the other bunnies as well. Tanpopo then creates her own giant bunny and the two of them begin fighting. Luckily, the teddy bear takes it down and the bunny acts like it's apologizing, only to attack the teddy once again. Elsewhere, AI is arguing with a store employee for not being allowed to bring her llama inside again. On the other hand, the fight between the teddy and bunny continues and the teddy starts to struggle a little. The bunny then jumps on the teddy and ends up receiving a brutal punch in return, making it crash onto the ground. AI and the others start to panic and the llama runs off as well. Suddenly, a dinosaur appears and pushes the teddy away. Now that it is a 2 versus 1, Kasumi decides to use her trump card and her teddy grows even further, making the other 2 seem like ants in comparison. She mentions that her duty is to protect her brother and crushes the 2 of them. Meanwhile, Kasumi sees the news about the fight on television and gets enraged. The tower witches end up running and Kasumi helps Hinoka stand up. Hinoka then mentions that they can't take it easy as Ayaka is in danger, but she points out that Ayaka is sitting on the teddy bear. He runs towards Ayaka and lets out a sigh of relief after realizing that she is unhurt. This results in Kasumi getting furious as he doesn't thank her even when she is the one who protected him in the first place. She then reminds Ayaka that she might be in charge of him outside the house, but while Hinoka is at home, Kasumi is in charge of protecting him. Following that, Ayaka tells Hinoka that he might have been lonely without her and decides to protect him 24 hours a day and asks him to lie at her house. Meanwhile, AI and the witches run into Kronwar's fat freaky alligator and decide to fight it. At the same time, the witches who cornered Ayaka are tied to a sign pole. Kronwar realizes that her plan failed once again and they decide to find out more about their past before making Hinoka swallow the pill. The alligator ends up capturing all the tower witches for Kronwar and Kazane finds out that Medusa escaped and thanks the person for the information, thinking that things might get noisy. Ayaka is present at Hanoka's house and his mom bows in front of her, asking her to take care of her son. While Ayaka puts a ton of sugar in her tea, their mother asks Hanoka and Kasumi to stay quiet as she has to say something important. Following that, his mother tells Hanoka that Ayaka is his fiancé and Kasumi tries confronting her. Their mother elaborates that she and Kazane have known each other since they were in school. The two of them became really close and even wanted to marry each other, but it wasn't possible, so they ended up with some Discord moderators. But when they had children, they made a promise to marry them to each other. She then asks Hanoka if he has met Kazane, and he agrees, which makes her even more delighted. His mother further mentions that the two of them already are in love, and Hanoka tries to clear the misunderstanding, thinking that their relationship is solely due to the Tower Witches. Eventually, Kasumi gets up furiously and questions her mom for making such weird jokes. Their mother tells Kasumi to let her brother go already, reminding her how she always sleeps with him, barges in when he takes a bath, and makes him collect the rare items in the game she likes. However, Kasumi doesn't find it weird, and while their mother holds Kasumi down, Hanoka and Ayaka leave the house. On their way, Hanoka apologizes for his family being a bit weird, and Ayaka asks Hanoka if he doesn't mind living with her. Hanoka replies that it's a rare opportunity for him to rizz her up and mentions that he feels at ease when she is near him. Ayaka then informs Hanoka that they most likely knew each other before, and she even has some memories, but can't recall them no matter how hard she tries. Currently, she thinks someone made them this way, someone with connections to his powers. However, she does remember one thing, which is to protect him with her life. Eventually, a limousine comes to pick them up, and she hides the little Hanoka dolls lying around. Soon after, they arrive at their house, which looks like the Empire State Building. All the maids and butlers welcome Ayaka home, and they get on the elevator that takes them to the 41st floor. Upon arrival, they find Medusa in front of them, and she sends him to the 12th floor. Medusa then asks for Ayaka's last words, and Ayaka decides to go all out from the start, and with that being said, the battle begins. Meanwhile, Hanoka gets stuck in the elevator and realizes that Ayaka won't be invincible if he isn't present there. Without hesitating, Hanoka puts on his robe when suddenly, Ayaka falls in the elevator. She advises him to take out his broom and run away. Hanoka wants to fight as well, and Ayaka reminds him that all he knows is how to run away. Just then, Medusa's powers start turning Ayaka into stone, and Hanoka agrees to do whatever Medusa wants if she lets Ayaka go. But Medusa refuses, as her soul is linked with his. Hanoka realizes that if he doesn't make it out alive, Ayaka won't live as well. He then remembers the pill that Kronwar gave him and wonders if it is a trap. But in the end, he decides to eat the pill, which results in the appearance of the White Princess, Evermillion. The fight between Medusa and Evermillion begins, and Medusa starts getting overwhelmed. Kazane thinks about how peaceful life is until her house explodes. The 5 witches are chilling on their own as well until a landslide hits the school. Kazane realizes that Medusa must be the culprit and orders every witch to gather and go witch hunting. After the explosion, Evermillion comments that she cleared up the view and advises Hanoka to not move as the building is shaking. He then asks Evermillion to return Ayaka back to normal, and she agrees. However, it will cost him something, and the thing she wants is his eyes, to which he agrees. Evermillion then asks for his ears, and he agrees again until she tells Hanoka that it was all a joke and whispers something in his ear. Hanoka starts to panic, but Evermillion says that it is the only way to wake up a sleeping beauty. She further tells Hanoka that Ayaka ended up like this because his belief in her wasn't strong enough. Just then, Medusa gets back up, and Evermillion tells Hanoka to hurry up. With that being said, Evermillion disappears after advising him to be careful. Having no other choice, Hanoka ends up kissing Ayaka on her cheeks, which undoes the curse. The 5 Tower Witches try assisting Medusa, but Ayaka blows them away. Following that, round 2 of the battle between Ayaka and Medusa begins. She manages to turn Ayaka's arm into a rock, but she shakes it off easily. Following that, both of them attack each other, and Ayaka's attack overwhelms Medusa's. Later that night, Hanoka wakes up and starts asking Ayaka if she is alright. He then wonders if that was just a dream, but finds Medusa sitting on the bed next to him. Ayaka promises to explain stuff later and starts off by kissing him on the cheek. Back at home, Mom is crying because Hanoka left and Kasumi gets summoned by Kazane. Hanoka notices all the witches heading somewhere, and Ayaka explains that a summon was issued, but her priority is Hanoka's protection. Afterward, Hanoka returns home along with Ayaka, offering her to live with them. Ayaka knocks on Hanoka's room door in order to wake him up and notices that it's open. At the same time, Kasumi returns home and goes to Hanoka's room, seeing Ayaka on top of him. During breakfast, Kasumi questions Ayaka staying at their house, and when her mom tries asking where she was all night, Kasumi shuts her down and starts calling her an idiot. This results in Mom falling onto the ground due to the shock she felt. Hanoka takes her to the futon, and Kasumi apologizes for taking out her anger on Mom. He then calls the doctor and leaves for school. Elsewhere, the Ayaka fan club is having a meeting and is scolded for not separating Hanoka from Ayaka. The student council president blames everyone including Hio and their science teacher. She then hands over this task to him, threatening to fire Mikage if he fails. This results in Mikage calling Ayaka and Hanoka to his room and telling Hanoka that he has been causing problems. He then asks if Hanoka knew what Ayaka was like last year and asks why everyone calls her princess. Mikage then informs him that their school has a tradition where everyone votes for a student that will serve as the face of their school, and Ayaka was the one selected as that student. However, the problem is when bad rumors start spreading about that student. Hanoka tries to argue, but Mikage reminds him that the two of them spend a lot of time together and says that the princess belongs to everyone. Nonetheless, Ayaka comments that no one can stand between them. Mikage agrees that he can't separate them as a model student like her is second to the council president and informs them how he might be fired if he fails. With that being said, Mikage uses a spell that transports Hanoka to a fairyland. He reassures Hanoka that Ayaka is fine and tells him to think of it as a science experiment. Following that, Mikage shows him the replica of the pill he swallowed and Hanoka tries acting as if he didn't know. Mikage further elaborates that his body has 5 seals. The first one is to keep the white princess locked in, which is now broken, and he suspects that Kazane might become his enemy. Apparently, the headquarters trusted Hanoka to Kazane because she is a powerful witch, but she only accepted if all his seals remained functional. It is likely that the other seals will break soon as well, and no one can stop it now. Luckily, Kazane is preoccupied with Medusa and Mikage advises him to hide it along with the fact that Ayaka is sheltering Medusa. Suddenly, the sky breaks and Ayaka appears, making sure that he didn't do anything freaky with Hanoka. Following that, Hanoka asks everyone to gather in the gym and the student council president informs Kazane about it as well. Ayaka then walks onto the stage and begins talking. She begins talking about how her being a model student of this school gives her authority over the students, and whether they love or don't is up to her. She uses that power to fire the current student council president and make Hanoka the new one. Hanoka tries opposing this idea, but Ayaka tells him that no one who can oppose them will be left. Afterward, Hio introduces Hanoka as the new president and Ayaka as the new vice president. The other students start to question Ayaka about her decision to make such a creep the new president. Surprisingly, Ayaka prepared a speech for Hanoka where he calls everyone his servants, but Hanoka decides not to use it. He then tells everyone that he didn't become the student council president because he wanted to, and asks all of them to acknowledge him for some time and gives them permission to fire him if he isn't good enough. On their way back home, Hanoka tells Ayaka to stop firing people at random because everyone looks up to her. He further tells Ayaka that there will always be people who oppose him and asks her to put her trust in him. Meanwhile, Kasumi is staking the two of them from afar and decides to follow them. Afterward, the two of them visit a shop where Ayaka notices Hanoka being taken away, and just then, Kasumi shoots Ayaka with a tranquilizer and reassures Hanoka that she will be fine, along with the fact that she has come to take back her brother. Following that, the siblings are riding a plane made from teddy bears, and Kasumi tells Hanoka that they are going to a place that nobody knows. Apparently, she heard that Kazane could become Hanoka's enemy, and she can't be sure that her daughter won't become one as well. Turns out Kasumi heard everything that Mikage said, and her only choice was to run away with him. Hanoka replies that the seals will break and it won't matter where he goes, but Kasumi replies that she can handle it with sister power. Suddenly, they notice Ayaka riding a dragon and following them. She begins attacking, and Hanoka tells Kasumi to surrender, but she refuses. Nonetheless, they keep on running away from Ayaka until the plane crashes into a tower. Hanoka falls down and Ayaka jumps off as well, managing to protect both him and Kasumi. Later, Hanoka wakes up in his room and asks about Kasumi, and Ayaka replies that she is asleep in her room. He then apologizes to Ayaka for what Kasumi did, and Ayaka replies that Kasumi showed her what a bond between siblings looks like. Furthermore, Ayaka offers to act like Hanoka's little sister, but he refuses, saying that she is more like his older sister than his younger sister, and she agrees to become the older sister instead. The next morning, Hanoka notices that the teddy bears he bought for Kasumi and Ayaka are ruined. Simultaneously, Kazane informs Hanoka's mom that she will be visiting their house. Their mother, Komachi, sits in front of the two kids and informs them that she had an affair after getting married and even had a baby. She left it with a distant relative, but now they are asking Komachi to take the child back. Komachi then introduces that child, who turns out to be Ayaka. The next morning, Hanoka sees Ayaka cooking for him, and he questions if she really is his older sister, but Ayaka asks him to address her like he always does. Apparently, Komachi left with Kazane and took Kasumi along. Hanoka compliments the miso soup she made, and Ayaka then starts doing the dishes. Ayaka tells Hanoka that she is wearing her uniform on the weekend because all her clothes were blown away, and Hanoka mentions that he just fell asleep in his. Meanwhile, Tenpopo is stalking them and remembers how Ayaka allowed them to hide in her room for the time being. She questions Medusa about hiding like this, and she replies that her goal was to take Hinoka without using her stone eyes or stone hands, and she lost because she underestimated Ayaka. Medusa further mentions that Ayaka doesn't want Kazane to know about Evermillion and is hiding them to keep their mouths shut as well. As long as they have mutual interest, Ayaka won't be doing anything careless. 6 hours earlier, the 5 witches went behind Medusa's back to capture Hinoka. They notice Hinoka sleeping and Ayaka sitting next to him. The 5 of them keep on waiting for Ayaka to sleep, but the next day arrives and she never does. Following that, Ayaka starts teaching Hinoka mathematics, saying that it is for him to improve his grades. Hinoka argues that he became her apprentice to learn how to fight, but she replies that fighting is dangerous as the Tower Witches could expose his baby elephant to the world. This makes him realize he hasn't made any progress since becoming her apprentice, and at this rate, she might start doing all of his chores. He then asks her to do something practical instead, but Ayaka reminds him that his grades are lower than her body count and they might not be able to attend the same college. This motivates Hinoka and he gets back to studying. Suddenly, it starts raining, and just then, Komachi and the others return. Ayaka tells Hinoka to dry himself off while she goes to help the others. Just then, the Tower Witches expose themselves and Kazane knocks Komachi and Kasumi to fight with them. However, Ayaka starts fighting Kazane instead, saying that she can't let her have them. Seeing how she is not moving, Kazane asks Hinoka to tell Ayaka to move. However, he remembers what Mikage said and tells Ayaka to not move. Ayaka then transforms and Medusa appears right next to her as well. Out of nowhere, Hinoka starts seeing Ayaka's memories, where she makes a deal with Medusa and presents the Apple of Discord that merges the powers of 2 witches. Medusa accepted and Ayaka became one with Medusa in order to protect Hinoka. Back in the present, the 2 of them merge into a single body, and Kazane mentions that Medusa's objective was most likely to find herself a successor and she chose Ayaka for the job. Medusa mentions that Kazane's thinking resembles that of an overthinking retired detective. Kazane then starts mocking the sad excuse of a cosplay they are wearing. With that being said, the fight between the 2 begins and Kazane slowly starts becoming a rock and manages to pin Ayaka down until she becomes a solid rock. However, Kazane easily gets out questions if they think this is enough to beat her. She informs Ayaka that Evermillion hates impurity and has most likely cut off her supply of magic. At the same time, Hinoka starts trying to use his powers and ends up switching places with Ayaka, making him get punched instead. In the end, the 2 of them get imprisoned in a cell, and even Ayaka's powers are not enough to burn the iron bars. She informs Hinoka that Medusa has been torn out of her and is being interrogated, so their secrets must be out by now. Ayaka further tells Hinoka that Kazane told her to make sure the seals aren't broken, and this way, she'll guarantee their protection in school, but if they are broken, they lose that protection. She then frees Hinoka of the handcuffs and continues the story, saying that she was sure that Kazane would torture the Tower Witches and decided to hide them as there is no beating her mother. Ayaka then mentions that she underestimated the seals and thought that they might not break, but they only break when he wishes them to. Her current plan is to defeat Kazane, as she is very sportsmanlike and will become their ally. Hinoka argues that it's impossible for them to defeat her, and Ayaka shoves her pumpkins in his mouth. Ayaka then tells Hinoka that there is a power in him that all the witches want, and if there is evil, he should never give in to it. She also says that the 2 of them will be going to school tomorrow. Elsewhere, Kazane is enjoying a board game with Kronwar and complains about how she was excited to torture Medusa, but the witches from another workshop took Medusa away. Afterward, an explosion occurs and Hinoka along with Ayaka comes out. Kazane goes after them on her broomstick, and Ayaka tells Kazane to prepare for a battle. However, she refuses to fight and later scolds them for causing an explosion. Hinoka remembers that while they were in prison, Ayaka reminded him of the powers she got when he kissed her and asked Hinoka to do the same thing. But this time, it needs to be stronger, and they decide to go with ear cleaning, which ends up transforming Ayaka. Back in the present, Kani and Hio appeared in front of Kazane on the last day of spring break as she needed a favor to ask. The 2 of them then took Ayaka, who newly joined the school, to their class. Everyone started to talk about the new baddie who joined their school. Kani had to teach Ayaka everything from top to bottom about the school. During lunchtime, girls started to gather around Ayaka and told Kani to stop acting like her manager, as she wasn't even cute. This resulted in Ayaka standing up and walking away from them. Later, Kani tells Ayaka that making friends is also important and asks about what she's reading, but Ayaka doesn't answer and Kani goes back to reading her manga. Kani then asked Hio if their school life would be this boring forever, and Hio replied that even if all the students became her friends, it would be still more fun just staying beside the princess. Following that, the 3 of them were looking at the test results when some delinquents cornered them for standing out in school. They were about to cut Ayaka's hair when she suddenly raised their body temperature, causing them to lose consciousness. On their way back home, Ayaka stops by a boys-only middle school and starts waiting for someone to appear. Following that, the three of them started hanging out more and more and eventually became good friends. They kept on spending time together and stalking the boys' school until spring arrived and it was time for them to start high school. On the first day, Ayaka saw Hanoka and ran toward him, only to see him locking hands with Kasumi. Back in the present, Ayaka wakes up and then goes on to wake Hanoka up as well. He mentions the dream he had about Ayaka's time in middle school. Kasumi also goes to the kitchen and notices the Tower Witches eating breakfast together. The following day, Kasumi is helping Komachi in the kitchen and goes upstairs to call Hanoka for lunch, only to see him playing doctor with Ayaka. He tries clearing up the misunderstanding, but Ayaka pins him down, leaving Kasumi in shock. On their way to school, Ayaka advises Hanoka to not call his powers even if he finds himself in danger. Hanoka realizes that the reason he is being targeted is because of Evermillion who is inside his body. During class, Mikage calls Hanoka to answer a question but he fails to do so, making Tanpopo make fun of him. After class, they notice some delinquents creating trouble inside the school and have made the school a lawless zone. Ayaka explains that this riot is caused because the students are dissatisfied with how things are going on and Tanpopo elaborates that he is the student council president, making him realize that his terrible approval rating led to a revolt. Just then, Hio falls in front of Hanoka and the delinquents also appear right then. They tell Hanoka to come to the gym after school on his own. Hio told Hanoka that it started when she was working as a bartender and saw the previous student council president talk to the delinquent about how Hanoka examined her curves and then kicked her out from the student council. During gym class, Ayaka informs Hanoka that the delinquent leader is known as Rinnan the Bear Killer as she once strangled a tiger who escaped the zoo with her bare hands and the tiger's name was Lucky Bear. Hanoka wonders why Kazane isn't furious and Tanpopo mentions that she ran into Kronwar who told her that Kazane was on a business trip and she was filling the role of the headmaster till then. After school, Ayaka decides to go with Hanoka as she has some advice to defeat Rinnan. Following that, Hanoka enters the gym and notices many students gathered around. Rinnan walks forward and Hanoka asks her to talk things out but she blames Hanoka for touching the ex-student council president's giant. She starts off by punching Hanoka to the ground and continues to beat him up. Suddenly, Hanoka's powers start acting up and he remembers how Ayaka told him to look for the delay while she lands her last punch and takes advantage of it to defeat her. Back in the present, Hanoka follows the advice and manages to pin Rinnan down but can't bring himself to land a punch. Suddenly, the light goes out and the Tower Witches appear. Rinnan gets furious and starts beating them up. Just then, Ayaka appears and punches Rinnan in the face, knocking her out. Soon after, Hanoka wakes up in Ayaka's arms and the witches help him stand up, but no one else can see them due to the robes. Following that, Ayaka told the ex-president to improve Hanoka's popularity and she'll reconsider her sentence. This results in Rinnan going after the ex-president after finding out that she'd been tricked. Kasumi knew nothing about it as she was out and Mikage also received treatment after the beatdown he got while Hanoka became the hero who defeated Rinnan. Elsewhere, the ex-president regrets doing what she did as Ayaka most likely hates her but Hio mentions that she along with Rinnan apologized so it should be all good. Hio further says that she even took out Ayaka's underwear every day for 6 months and did all sorts of freaky stuff until Ayaka found out but she didn't stop being friends with her. Kani also did something similar but Ayaka is still her friend. Ayaka takes Hanoka to a tall building's rooftop to teach him how to fight. She takes out a whip and Hanoka mentions how she didn't want to teach him before as it was dangerous. Ayaka replies that he secretly trains and even takes baths with Kasumi. She then quiets him down and doesn't want to hear any excuses. The first thing he needs to learn is how to manifest his magic. After telling him to relax, Ayaka presses her talents against Hanoka, making him lose all his focus. Hanoka tells her to step back as she always dots on him like this, which makes her furious as a fire beast appears in front of him. Ayaka's plan is to make Hanoka fight that thing and she reassures him that no damage will be done to her. The beast attacks Hanoka and Ayaka tell him to not run away but to stand his ground. It whips Hanoka away and he loses consciousness. Ayaka notices his scraped elbow and decides to stop but Hanoka disagrees, saying no one loses their life over a scraped knee. This results in her dropping him off the building while the beast attacks him. Ayaka then advises Hanoka to focus and call up a strong image. Elsewhere, the Tower Witches have decided to join the gym and pump up those muscles. But Tanpopo broke a toenail and decided to cancel the workout plan for the day. Meanwhile, Hanoka is still falling down and can only think of dirty thoughts. Eventually, he manages to summon a huge girl that saves the two of them. The girl turns out to be Ayaka in a miniskirt. His summoned girl then punches a building and Hanoka, who is panicking over controlling her, starts feeling lightheaded and the girl disappears. The building she punched was where the witches along with Mikage were present. Kronwar mentions that he was able to pull it off without breaking the second seal but Mikage argues that the new seal must have been broken when he fought Rinnan the other day. She further mentions that they're doing things like this will make the secret of witches leak out, and Mikage asks her to stop, but she replies that her only goal was to make him swallow the pill and she has to wait until the other seals break. Elsewhere, Kazane is present in front of a weird pattern, and Rinnan informs that a messenger from the tower told them that she has taken everyone in town hostage. At the same time, Ayaka is taking Hinoka back home, and he asks Ayaka the reason she decided to train him. Tanpopo told Hinoka that they all met up to plan a strategy to fight against Rinnan, and that it was the ex-vice president's plan to make Rinnan fight Hinoka and lose to boost his popularity. Hinoka then thanked Ayaka and mentioned that the school needs to take a chill pill, and Ayaka remembers a dream where Hinoka told her that they will get to spend a lot of time in school doing chores together and advised her to join the student council. Back in the present, Ayaka reminds Hinoka of the final tests, saying those are more important. The following week, the witches eat breakfast together and Hinoka tells Ayaka to do their best for the tests. Elsewhere, a witch named Weekend meets up with Kazane. She informs her that she saw the pattern multiple times during the war and they slaughter friend and foe alike. In other words, it is like a bomb that can wipe out the whole city, advising Kazane to not mess with it. Kazane replies that it is bound by a blood contract and asks Weekend to negotiate, saying that she probably called her because of Hinoka. However, Weekend disagrees, saying that she will have Hinoka but the bomb has a different purpose. She mentions that fighting ordinary people with magic is hard as it is almost impossible to eliminate them. The reason behind it is the workshop that protects the town from magic and maintains a barrier over the town. It is designed to automatically save people from taking damage from magical attacks, but still, it loses its energy every time it protects people, and Kazane's powers aren't weak enough for it to fail. But what if she has to protect the lives of everyone in town at once? Suddenly, the manholes around town start exploding and Kazane starts feeling exhausted. Everyone in class starts to panic, but Ayaka asks Hinoka to return to his seat and finish the test. Suddenly, the floor falls down and Ayaka's test paper burns, which makes her get up and take Hinoka away. Meanwhile, Weekend mentions that she also gave Medusa and Kronwar some information and they made fine pawns. Kazane loses consciousness and Ayaka takes Hinoka to a secret location within the school. And Weekend also traps Kazane inside a room. Eventually, Hinoka and Ayaka arrive in a rundown coliseum where other witches are present as well. Kasumi tells Hinoka that Rinnan is her teacher and Rinnan introduces their leader, Natsume, and Atori, who isn't really friendly with others. Natsume mentions that there was a slight accident during an experiment in the science room and tell him to relax, only to point a gun at Hinoka. She then shoots some bullets and Ayaka punches the crap out of her. Ayaka continues fighting Rinnan, and Hinoka realizes that the damage must be done to Ayaka and manages to save her before the others attack. Rinnan then knocks out Kasumi and tells Hinoka to come with them. Following that, Rinnan takes Hinoka and Ayaka underground, allowing him to ask any questions after this is over, which includes her cup size. She then leads them to a room and warns them not to break out. Inside the room, Hinoka realizes that he can't use magic and Ayaka apologizes for not catching up sooner. Ayaka figures that locking them in there means either Kazane found out about Evermillion or her protection is gone. But she should be here, which leaves the fact that Kazane was defeated. Just then, a teddy bear drops inside the room and a hologram of Weekend appears, but before she can say anything, Ayaka destroys it. She then destroys a wall and decides to escape, promising Hinoka that she will defeat Weekend. Hinoka and Ayaka are walking up the stairs and she mentions that it is a different route that no one uses. They open the door and witness the city burning in flames. Elsewhere, Natsumi is explaining what caused the explosions and says that there were no casualties, but Kazane is currently in enemy hands. Hio mentions that the witches are not protected by the barrier, and Rinnan adds that help will take some time to arrive. Natsumi further says that the witches of this town are not really experienced, and Hio also comments on how workshop witches can't use magic without the barrier. They are ordered to flee if any enemy witches appear during the rescue mission, and everything depends on how long it will take for Kazane to return. Furthermore, only a few witches can temporarily hold the barrier, and the others will just lose their magic trying. Hinoka starts worrying about his mom and Ayaka reassures him that she is alright, but he keeps on panicking, wondering if this is all his fault. Ayaka replies that everyone is safe, but the town was destroyed because of Hinoka and she knows how he feels. She then reminds Hinoka that he was the one who saved her when she was petrified by Medusa. This makes Hinoka calm down and Ayaka asks him to come with her. The enemy wants to break into the workshop and Ayaka wants to get there before they do. She warns him to watch his step as even the robe won't save him from falling down. Hinoka asks her about not being able to use magic and Ayaka replies that the workshop witches form a contract that absorbs the magic of the witches to protect the civilian. Additionally, the contract with the town is the prerequisite that allows the workshop witches to use magic. Ayaka further mentions that if the contractor, that is Kazane, comes back, the town will be restored to its original form. Suddenly, Hinoka falls down and Ayaka jumps after him. Luckily, both of them manage to land without sustaining any injuries, and Hanoka questions about the place they are going. Meanwhile, a witch equipped with bombs comes to Natsume, saying that the tower witches have given them 30 minutes to bring Hanoka to them or the bombs will go off. At the same time, Tenpopo and the others are stalking Weekend from afar along with Kasumi. Apparently, Ayaka and Hanoka are headed to the location of the contract. Just then, a witch named Gibraltar appears in their way. Ayaka pushes Hanoka away and starts fighting Gibraltar, but ends up getting crushed by her stone puppet. Surprisingly, Ayaka then manages to get on the puppet and lands a kick on Gibraltar's face. Gibraltar realizes that Ayaka shouldn't be able to use magic, and she replies that it was just an average kick. Hio tries calling Hanoka's prison cell, but they don't pick up, and Rinon figures that it will take them 45 minutes to bring them back. Natsumi also checks the bombs and realizes that there is no blood contract, and with a dispelled incantation, they can be easily disarmed. The witch equipped with a bomb informs Natsumi that she was saving civilians when a hot blondie appears and did this to her. At the same time, Kronwar wakes up and finds her room a complete mess. The overweight alligator informs her that the witch who used her is responsible for all of this. This results in Kronwar getting excited as the witch who beat Kazane is in front of her and she'd like to have a taste of her. Elsewhere, Ayaka and Hanoka arrive at the sacred workshop ground, and Hanoka is aware that he needs to make a contract. Meanwhile, Natsumi along with Rinon and the Bomb Witch appear in front of Weekend, saying that they will be needing more time. But Weekend refused to negotiate, making Rinon furious. Weekend mentions that the timer will soon go off and the witches she has under her control will be blown to pieces. Kasumi figures that Weekend might be the negotiator and a completely different witch could have set up the bombs. This means she must be watching them just like they are, and Tenpopo decides to search the school. Rinon notices that the others came up with a plan and decides to attack Weekend if the timer goes off. Ayaka tells Hanoka that he will feel immense pressure and magic will be sucked out of him when the contract is formed, but if he is successful, the witches will be able to use magic again. Only 30 seconds remain when Hanoka walks towards the tree and gets enveloped by several roots. Just when the timer runs out, Tenpopo arrives and uses the Dispel spell. Rinon and Natsumi start running at Weekend while she holds the switch. They start to feel their magic return and they use Dispel while Rinon punches Weekend to the ground. Meanwhile, Hanoka wakes up in Ayaka's arms and she mentions that he slept for 3 hours straight. Rinon and Natsumi manage to lock Weekend behind the crystal, and Natsumi tells Rinon that Kasumi's group is searching for Ayaka and Hanoka. Weekend tells Rinon that she came quietly out of respect as they defeated her. She further mentions that Rinon is most likely worried that a witch who can defeat Kazane can't be defeated by them, and mentions how they lack basic battle knowledge. Weekend then takes off her robe and shows them the bombs tied to her waist, exploding them afterward. She then manages to get out and calls out Hanoka, saying that his friends will soon lose their lives. Suddenly, Hanoka finds himself in front of Weekend, who tells her about the bombs present at the Colosseum. He informs Ayaka about this and begins using his own magic. His powers start healing all the witches who have lost consciousness. Kasumi runs into an enemy witch while Kronwar gives Weekend's underling a low taper fade, forcing her to confess. Hanoka keeps on using magic and eventually faints. Back in the present, when Komachi was still a school student, she used to get bullied, but one day, Kazane stood up for her and beat all the bullies. Hanoka sees Kazane's memories of when he was a kid and went somewhere with Kazane. A few years later, Ayaka told Kazane that she found Hanoka and asked her to put them in the same class. Just then, Hanoka appears in front of Mikage and tells him that he will be his escort. Turns out he saw him in the cycle of recollection when he was seeing Kazane's memories. She most likely has a deep connection with Hanoka as the former contractor. Apparently, the place they are in is the space between dimensions, and as Hanoka made the contract, he is connected to that place. Mikage then mentions that Natsume is actually his niece and is in line to become the next leader. Men have low standing in witch families, and one day, it might be the same for Hanoka as well. They then arrive at the heart of the city, which is filled with stars, and each little light is a human life. This is where they evacuate civilians in times of magic disasters. Komachi is currently in there as well, and when the town is restored, they will return to their own world. Their memories are erased by Mikage before sending them back, as he is a memory-erasing mage. Tenpopo is trying to find her friend when she feels an earthquake. Turns out it is due to the bears fighting each other. Kasumi and the Tower Witch's bear are having a not-so-kid-friendly fight, and Kasumi's bear eventually manages to beat the other bear. However, it stands up again, and Kasumi mentions how her magic is a copy of her own. The other 4 witches talk about how the Tower Witch can copy other witches and is currently copying Kasumi's magic. Suddenly, one of the bear's attacks makes the antisocial Rin fall down, and Kasumi manages to save her but gets punched instead. Elsewhere, Atori appears and asks Ayaka about Hanoka's condition. She then informs Ayaka that she carried out the mission just like she ordered and further informs that Kronwar has started to hunt down all the town witches. Following that, she asks Atori to keep an eye on Hanoka while he goes out for a bit, commenting on how Weekend is her prey. Just when Kasumi is about to get attacked, Medusa saves her and destroys the other bear. Medusa then scolds the girls for camping like complete noobs, mentioning that she has been a little too easy on them. With that being said, she takes them away while the other witches follow her. At the same time, Atori mocks Ayaka for not letting her help and allows her to use the weapon she left beside the umbrellas. With that being said, Ayaka flies around the town and arrives at the church where Weekend is present. Without wasting any time, Ayaka tries attacking but is pushed away. Weekend says that she won't have an upper hand as the building is filled with bombs. Meanwhile, Mikage tells Hanoka that he was the one who took Ayaka and his memories away, and when he tries arguing, the two of them get attacked. Ayaka keeps on trying to dodge the bombs and try attacking Weekend but keeps on failing. Following that, she manages to run through the bombs and Weekend mentions she is impressed by how Ayaka used her own magic to defend herself against the explosion. Ayaka then lunges forward, but Weekend keeps on detonating more and more C4S, allowing her to dodge Ayaka's attack. On the other hand, Atori puts a ton of baby wipes on top of Hanoka and his puppet scolds her, telling Atori to do as he says. His first order is to strip Hanoka and shove an onion up his rice cake. Meanwhile, Weekend manages to defeat Ayaka and pities her while holding her face. Suddenly, Ayaka lights her on fire, saying that her magic is gone, but this is Hanoka's magic. Ayaka remembers when she gave him a good time and tells Weekend that her biggest mistake was thinking that Hanoka was not with her. Unexpectedly, Weekend gets back up and causes another explosion. This time, her puppets get up as well and her Ayaka gets ready for round 2. Mikage can't believe the tower witches are attacking this place and decides to send Hanoka back, reassuring him that he will beat the weaklings in no time. Hanoka then wakes up and panics after seeing himself commando. He then finds out the place where Ayaka is fighting and tries to leave, but Atori pins him down, saying that he has a fever. Following that, Mikage communicates with Atori through her puppet, saying that he took care of the witches but they placed a bomb in the evacuation site. They told Mikage that the bomb would explode in 30 minutes and asked to bring Hanoka to Weekend. Hanoka ends up hearing it and asks Atori to take him to Ayaka. Elsewhere, Ayaka is defeated by Weekend and is restrained by her puppets. Weekend tells Ayaka that she always keeps a recovery potion in her bosoms and spends half an eye rigging the church and the whole city with bombs. Hanoka notices an explosion nearby which was caused by Ayaka to escape. She then finds herself in Hanoka's arms, who asks her to use his magic powers, informing her about the bomb at the evacuation site. Ayaka then powers up and attacks the henchmen of Weekend, followed by her slamming Weekend onto the ground and asking for the switch. Tanpopo is walking around town and walks into Kasumi's bear. She doesn't understand what it is saying and asks her bunny to translate, which tells her about Kasumi. The evacuation area starts exploding when it has not even been 30 minutes and a bomb right below Mikage explodes as well. Weekend tells Ayaka that it was not a time bomb but was supposed to explode when Hanoka showed up. She then starts blaming Hanoka for everything and tells him to break the seals. This results in Hanoka using his powers to stop the explosions, and before he can do anything, the magic disappears and he falls down. Following that, he finds himself in front of Evermillion. Meanwhile, Tanpopo is carrying Kasumi around while the bear and Teddy have become besties. Evermillion tells Hanoka that they are within her barrier and figures that he is trying to save all the people in the town from the witches. She then adds that a big wish requires a big compensation, which is his life. Hanoka realizes that his demise means Ayaka's demise as well, and he starts to wonder what the right thing is to do. In the end, he agrees to make the deal and uses his powers to restore the whole town back to normal again. Medusa tells her underlings that this is the power she wants. Ayaka tells Hanoka to stop using his powers, and he apologizes to Ayaka, telling her about the deal. However, she doesn't find it upsetting and mentions that she can't live without him anyway. Just then, Ayaka tells Evermillion to use her life instead and she falls onto the ground. Weekend uses this chance to stab Hanoka. However, he manages to pull the knife out and almost stabs Weekend, telling her that no matter how many times she tries to blow up the city, he will do the same thing and save everyone he sees before him. Sadly, Hanoka loses all his strength and falls down. Weekend gets back up and advises Hanoka to ask his friends to take care of the wound and tells him to prepare for their next meeting. She then tells her henchmen to go with Plan F and come get her in 8 hours. Atori sees Weekend coming out of the church unharmed and eventually runs into Kronwar. Atori uses this chance to go inside and witnesses Hanoka holding Ayaka in his arms. Meanwhile, all the other witches start healing and Kasumi accuses Tanpopo of wanting to get freaky with her while she was unconscious. The bear tries explaining things to Kasumi, but she orders him to beat her. The bunny tells the teddy to follow his master as he will take one for the team. This results in the Teddy punching them away. Mikage calls Atori again and talks about everything getting back to normal and asks Atori to let him talk to Hanoka. Mikage compliments Hanoka, but he replies that he messed up as Ayaka has lost her life. Meanwhile, Cromwell and Weekend are walking around the town and she tells Weekend that she should choose the place of her demise. Weekend replies that it doesn't matter and the battle between them commences. Mikage hears the whole story from Hanoka and mentions that something is strange, as if he made a deal with his own life, then someone else's life shouldn't work. Following that, Mikage tells Hanoka to draw a magic circle on the floor and place Ayaka in the center. On the other hand, Cromwell easily manages to beat Weekend and comments on how effortless it was. AI complains that she has nothing to do with it and the llama surely doesn't. Weekend starts panicking about the fact that Hanoka is still alive when he was supposed to have met his demise and his powers should have been hers. Mikage then tells Hanoka to cut his hand and drop the blood on Ayaka's plot and end it all with a kiss. Apparently, this is the ritual of resigning, as he needs to restore the contract. Eventually, Hanoka mans up and ends up kissing her forehead, but it doesn't seem to work. The puppet tells him to try again, but before he can reach her lips, Hanoka starts to panic. The puppet starts getting frustrated and tries pushing him down, but just then, Ayaka starts breathing again and opens her eyes. Elsewhere, Cromwell mentions that Weekend made her create that candy and says that using her was a big mistake. Weekend replies that they ended up doing what they wanted as Medusa was freed while Cromwell got to fight. She further mentions that she is aware of Cromwell's goal, but she replies that Weekend is mistaken and mentions that she lost because she didn't know her opponent. The Fire Witch not only protected Hanoka but also bound him. Just then, Kazane appears out of nowhere and says that even when she regained the magic back in a couple of hours, it was her decision to leave things to her students. But that being said, she asks Cromwell to hand Weekend over, but she refuses, which results in the two of them fighting each other and preparing for a fight. Eventually, Kazane comes out as the victor. Elsewhere, Ayaka asks Evermillion to release Hanoka from the contract and give the powers she uses back to Hanoka. Evermillion tells Hanoka that he didn't even use her powers and saved the people of the town by using his own powers, which is why the deal was called off. Following that, Hanoka wakes up in his bed and Ayaka is there to greet him. Later, the two of them walk to school and Ayaka tells Hanoka that it will take some time for her magic to recover. Hanoka mentions that the town is back to normal and Ayaka praises him for protecting it. Just then, the five witches appear and brag about receiving training from Medusa, ready to steal Hanoka away. They all try attacking him but are easily handled by Ayaka, making Hanoka realize that nothing really changed. This was all about the witches. Do you think Hanoka will ever release all his seals? Comment magic below if you want someone like Ayaka as well. Make sure to like and subscribe. See you guys in the next video.